got quite a crowd. What I'd like to do is quick introductions. We don't have a lot of time, so I'd love to have you say your name and where your program will be going this year. But I'm going to start first with my team, and I'll call you out by name so that we can be sure to hit everyone that's on the screen. So can I start with you, Crystal?
Hello, good morning, everyone. My apologies for my voice. I'm experiencing a extended case of laryngitis now, but I'm Crystal Booker-Roish, and I am the program manager for the Office of Global Education.
Thank you, Crystal. Nicole?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nicole Heron. I'm a senior study abroad coordinator, and I'm one of those public health students going to Cuba next month. So I'm very excited to be participating as a student on one of our programs this year.
That's right. That's great, Nicole. How about you, Emily?
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Wheeler, and I'm also a senior study abroad coordinator with the team.
Okay, then I'm going to move on now to the faculty. Professor Lee, can you introduce yourself? Yeah, I see his name only, so maybe he's just logged on. I do know that he's joining our program from the CAP school that's going to Mexico City. So Mary Lee, I see that you're next. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I lost my connection for a little bit, and I just heard that you mentioned the Mexico program.
That's right. So I introduced you, but thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to getting to know you during the next couple of hours.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry, like my connection is very laggy this morning.
We sure know how that goes. And if you miss anything, let's you and I circle back a little bit later.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, Crystal. Okay, Mary Lee, good to see you.
Hi, I'm Mary Lee Stansfer, and I am taking a group to London, the London Calling, which is a sports and entertainment management class during Maymester. And we've been doing this class from the business school for, I don't know, 15, 18 years. And I've done it, this will be my 4th time. And I've done, 6 or 8 other courses for study abroad in the last 20 years.
Oh, she's one of our biggest champions. Thank you, Mary Lee, for joining us. Rebecca, you're next on my screen.
Yes, hi. I also go by Becky. I'm co-leading a trip to Japan with Brian DeLevy.
A big one too. Really excited to see how many students. I think nearly 20.
We have 25. Yeah.
Woo! Yeah. Larry.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Larry Captain here, and in the College of Arts and Media and Department of Music and Entertainment Industry Studies, co-leading a program in art, design, and meditation to Nepal with Cecilia Wu and Young Wong.
Also another popular one. Hi, Anne. Good morning, Anne Chin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ann Chin. I'm in the Department of Geography and Environmental Sciences, and I'm leading a group to France. I think it's one of 2 groups to France, and our focus is on the changing environment in response to human interactions, and also with an eye towards sustainability into the future.
Thank you, Anne. George Chavez.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jorge Chavez, School of Education and Human Development in the Human Development Family Relations Program. And I'm co-leading with Christine Engelbrecht a service-based study abroad program in Sevilla, Spain. 4th year doing it, is my first chance to do it. So I'm excited.
Great, great. Ken?
Hi, everybody. I'm Ken Truppel from the College of Architecture and Planning. I'll be co-leading with Eugene Howard, an urban planning and urban design studio focused on public spaces to Mexico City. And this is my 4th study abroad program.
Thank you, Ken. Hi, Matt. Nice beard.
Hi, I'm Matt Shea, assistant professor in the architecture department, and we'll be leading with Stephanie Rogers and taking 17 students to Rome this summer. I think it's my 6th or 7th time.
All right. Joan?
Hi, I'm Joan O'Connell from the School of Public Health, and I'll be leading the public health program to Cuba. We're absolutely delighted to have Nicole with us on the trip. And I'll be interested to know if any of the other people on the call on the meeting today are also traveling to Cuba.
Thank you. I think that's the first where one of our staff is going as a student. Cecilia Wu.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cecilia Wu. I'm assistant professor from the music department. I'm co-leading the music design and meditation course in Nepal, Kathmandu with Larry and Yang. So great to be here. Thank you.
Great. Lori Willard.
I wasn't ready to unmute myself. Lori Willard, director of the French program, and I'm only taking 6 students to Aix-en-Provence, France, to look at identity and culture and history and civilization.
Fascinating. Annie Miller.
Hi all, I'm in the School of Public Affairs and I'm taking students to Bosnia and Croatia to study ethnic politics and policy.
Thank you, Annie. Andrew Jacobson.
Yeah, hello, everybody. My name is Andrew Jacobson. I'm going to be helping Mary Lee out with the London Calling program.
Awesome. Welcome aboard.
Yeah.
Christine.
Hi, everybody. I am Christine Engelbrecht, and I will be heading to Spain, co-leading with Jorge Chavez from Human Development and Family Relations.
Excellent. And Taylor?
Hi, everyone. My name is Taylor Craver. I'm the Director of International Operations. So happy to be here with all of you today. In the Office of International Affairs, sorry.
She's a key partner in our risk management, so I'm glad you could join us. Elena Jones.
Greetings, everyone. Elena Jones, Associate Vice Chancellor of the Office of International Affairs.
All right, Lori.
I'm Laura Janucki, the Assistant Director for the Risk Management Program at the Business School, and we are taking a group of students to study global risk management in the Financial District in London. And I think this is my 6th time.
6th time. Stephanie Rogers.
Hi, everyone. I'm Steph Rogers. I'll be joining Matt Shea for the RUM program for CAP as support staff.
All right. Thank you. Eugene.
Good morning, everyone. This is Eugene Howard. I am an assistant professor in the College of Architecture and Planning, and I am going to Mexico City with my colleague, Ken Schreppel, who you saw just a moment ago. Really excited for it and really excited to hear about all the different programs. And this will be my 2nd time. So thank you.
And Mexico is becoming a popular destination. Thank you. Erica?
Hi, my name is Erica Hyman. I work with Mary Lee on the London Calling program. This will be my 2nd year in the program.
Great, thank you. And I think the last is John, but I'll find out. John, are you there? Did I miss anyone? All right, let's move on with the program. Back to you, Crystal.
Thank you, Catherine. And just to summarize our agenda for today's orientation, thank you all again for those wonderful introductions and for sharing your the nature of your programs with all of us. We're going to have a risk management expectations and IRMC overview provided by Elena Jones. Our team will then provide an overview of global risk updates, along with our updated COVID-19 guidance as you're preparing to lead your programs this summer. We'll then discuss reporting incidents abroad and some changes that we've made to those protocols over last semester, along with reminders about the Clery Act. We'll then discuss some emergency action plans, our Gallagher Insurance International SOS, share some reminders for faculty and some new expectations that our team would like to share with all of you, especially upon returning from your programs. Our OIA finance team will also give a quick presentation related to program expenses, and then we'll have a break. The second half of our Orientation will be optional for returning faculty, though highly recommended, especially knowing that there have been some staffing changes among the different offices that will be presenting. We'll have a presentation from the Office of Equity, along with a presentation from the Student and Community Counseling Center. And last but not least, a presentation from the Office of Student Conduct, who now has a new director whom we would like to introduce to all of you. And then we'll end with some last Q&As and final reminders for everyone. Please know that this orientation is being recorded, and we'll share all of these resources with everyone in the coming days. And next we'll have Elena discuss risk management expectations.
Thank you so much, Crystal. It's really great to see all of you. Lots of familiar faces for me, a few new faces. And I really want to take the time first to thank each and every one of you for the critical role you play in creating impactful and often transformational academic learning experiences abroad. The commitment that each of you have to facilitating these critical experiences and opportunities is truly inspirational. So first, I just really, really thank each and every one of you. So my role in our session today is to share the institutional view on risk and the accompanying expectations. We know risk is inherent. Therefore, our goal is not to completely eliminate risk. That is impossible. It's impossible here on campus. And that's true, obviously, when we travel overseas. Instead, our priorities are to control risk where we can and disclose risk where we cannot completely control it. So, for example, controlling risk means structuring our timelines and logistics so that we're not driving at night, ensuring vehicles have seatbelts, using best practices when we're engaging with wildlife in remote areas. Those are examples of controlling our risks. Examples of disclosing our risk are disclosure of endemic disease in a given location and disclosing the proper prophylaxis or preventative measures that we have to take relative to that disease, or disclosing the amount of walking that a student will be expected to do on the program. And what's really important about disclosure is that informed consent is the other side of that coin. We disclose to our participants in advance so that they can make an informed decision to participate. So that's what our goal is. We're controlling our risk. We're disclosing what the experience is going to be like. We're disclosing the expectations of the participants so that they can make an informed choice. And in order to do this properly, we have to embed risk management into all of the planning and activities that we do. It started when you submitted your proposal for your program, and it will end when the program is officially over. It's a through line throughout. So throughout, it's vitally important to use the risk management tools, the emergency response resources, and the student support services, both in country and back on campus. The global education team, this fantastic team, is here to support you. And if you're in any doubt about whether you should be asking them about a particular situation that you're experiencing, you should definitely be asking them that question. The other thing to really reinforce is that culture sets the tone. How you engage with the students about safety and risk management will set the safety tone for your program. If you are dismissive, they will be dismissive. If you're intentional, they will be intentional. And as we know, there may be students on your program that feel quite confident about their worldliness, when in fact, they may be the same students that assume that you call 911 to get emergency services in every single country. So saying no, setting clear boundaries is often really necessary. And I would also say asking questions to understand is often necessary to really get at exactly what a student may be trying to convey, maybe what they're scared about, have fears about, anxieties about. It's often really important to ask this question because they may not have the words to explain it. They may be in a brand new situation and they may not be able to come up with the words. You are the role model on this trip, whether they are prepared to admit it or not, and they are paying attention and will be following your lead. So that's really important. Next slide, please. So this slide has information about the International Risk Management Committee's roles and responsibilities. The IRMC is chaired by Taylor, who's on this call. What I really want to focus on for this slide is international incident response. Emergencies and incidents do happen. When they do, you have your emergency action plan, which we'll be talking about later in the agenda. You have your emergency action plan to guide you through the correct steps. I also want you to know that you have a team here to support. As needed, the IRMC will be mobilized to provide support for any emergency. We train for this. We conduct mock scenarios several times a year. We plan for the worst and expect the best. So in terms of roles, I really want to simplify it. And this is how I would state it in its simplest terms. You are the leads on the ground, and your responsibilities are to your group and to your safety. The IRMC is the lead back in Denver and Aurora, and our responsibilities are to ensure that the campus support is there for what is needed on the ground. So what that means is your role in an incident will not be to communicate with parents or other contacts. It will not be to communicate with campus leadership, and it certainly won't be to sort out any budgetary aspects of an emergency response. Your role is there attending to the group and to yourself. And we have to always consider a scenario where you are the emergency. We are also thinking about your health and safety always, and it's at the forefront. So as we think about any part of the program and the logistics and the activities, if any part of that risk management plan related to those things is solely reliant on you or solely reliant on your actions, if any emergency response is solely reliant on you, that is really a trigger for us to consider other support mechanisms and other contingencies, because we have to think about everyone's safety, and your safety is paramount for us. Any questions? Thank you.
I guess I'll ask a question.
Please.
International Risk Management Committee. I just want to check my emergency plan that I have the correct contact information. Will that be provided?
Yeah, so in your emergency action plan, in those steps, one of those steps is to contact someone within the Office of Global Education. And so you should have multiple numbers listed there. Every single member of the Office of Global Education is on that committee. They are part of the training scenarios. So the member that you contact of Global Ed will make an initial assessment about what the situation is and make the determination about whether we need to go ahead and mobilize the emergency response mechanism within the International Risk Management Committee. So there's not a specific IRMC contact on your EAP. It's one of those individuals listed on your EAP that will then trigger the process. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Elena. I appreciated that overview. Obviously, it's so essential. Moving on then to the next slide, I'd like to just spend a few minutes on this and hopefully leave time for any questions. Let me assure you, as Elena alluded, we have a very experienced team back here, and we have access to all the resources you need in the event of an incident. And when you're out there with the students, feel free to always blame us if they want to go scuba diving on the weekend, or they think it's a great idea to take a group on a moped. They aren't allowed to drive, and our insurance doesn't cover every single sport. So you need to really lean in and make sure you're minimizing the risks with those students and keeping an eye on that. We have a 24/7 duty officer within OGE, so call us at any time. And we will make sure that you've got all the resources you need with ISOS. And hopefully you'll call ISOS in coordination with writing your emergency action plan, so you're comfortable and you're aware of the resources and you've got that number already in your phone. Never hesitate to send a student to the ER. It happens quite often, and it's always the best answer. ISOS is going to tell you what hospitals to go to in your area, and we've not had a problem with that. When you call us, of course, we're going to not only be there as a resource for you and to help walk you through what kind of support is needed, but we will be the liaison then to the International Risk Management Committee and make sure that they're aware of what we're facing out there. We're also going to guide you through insurance. The requirements for insurance policy need detailed receipts, and it means that we've got to keep them informed along the way too. Before you even leave on your trip, probably at your orientation with your students, it's a good idea to set up some rules and some guidance to share with the students. For example, implementing a curfew, how far they can travel on weekends, that they need to always travel with buddies. And there's several other rules that you may want to put in place depending on the destination. So if you don't have a list already, let us know. We'll try to find some examples for you to look at and develop your own. And as you know, travel is stressful, even in the best of times. So you've got students who are going often overseas for the first time in a long time. They could be very jet lagged. They might have stayed up late the night before. They start to feel a little down, missing people. Be sure to keep your eye on those students. Take breaks, let them take naps those first couple of days, help them get through it and back on schedule. And if need be, they need to reach back to the counselors on campus or to their own resources, or call ISOS. ISOS has therapists, and they have up to 5 calls per student during and after the trip. And we've had good results with those therapists. They do this all day long, helping students who are doing study abroad. So don't hesitate to suggest to someone that they do that. Also, if you haven't already taken a mental health first aid course or some other mental health support course, please go ahead and sign up to take one before you go. The ones that are on the bottom bullet there, you can help a student. Unfortunately, it was listed on Skillsoft last week, and then this morning when I double checked, it wasn't there. But there are 3 or 4 courses. I have asked for the updated list, and I'll be sure to get it to you if you haven't already taken it. That really gives you the confidence you need on how to help a student in the event that you have someone, and it happens, who ends up being down or stressed or anxious or all the other things that we often feel when we're traveling. Finally, as a study abroad leader, you are a campus security authority, and you'll need to take that training, the CU Campus Security Authority training, in order to comply with the Clery Act. A Clery report is due every single year by every campus in the United States. It's a federal law, and we're required to report crimes that occur on campus or on study abroad. So we need you to be aware that you're a campus security authority. Take that short course and be sure that we're well aware of what happens there abroad so that we can comply with that federal law. Moving on to the other screen there. As you all know, the pandemic is still with us. I looked it up this morning, and Colorado is still facing over 2,000 cases a week, and our rate is higher than the national average. So we still need to be vigilant. It really works when you follow our COVID protocol. In academic year 22, we only had 4 or 5 cases out of 275 plus students. And during the winter room, we didn't have anyone. But by golly, a trip that went out last month ended up with 5 students and maybe 1 faculty who tested positive. So imagine how that affected their whole program when you've got to isolate and then stagger their returns. So we've emailed you some guidance, but we also want you to get in touch with myself or your liaison in OGE to go through that protocol, because there are, insurance requirements, and we want you really to implore the students to mask up 2 weeks before they get on that plane and keep their masks on throughout the travel. We like them to stay in the pod because almost everybody's vaccinated and we know they're all negative. And many programs have the students take a COVID test in advance 2 days before you leave and then show the faculty that it's negative. We also like it if the students all throw a test kit into their bag so that they have that available, and you can pick up a handful of test kits from Link's Central customer service desk, just saying that Lacey Clint, her name is on there, sent you to pick up test kits so that you've got a few to use as well. Some of the lessons that we learned during the last incident where we had a uptick in positive cases were that group tickets are a challenge when you've got to start sending students back in different batches. And that happens if you've got 2 isolating now and then 3 days later isolating again, because the isolation is 5 days. So that apparently was quite a challenge to have to deconflict all of these group tickets. You should identify in advance where your students can get their PCR test. You should identify in advance where you might be able to get an extra hotel room if you have to isolate a student, and how to assist them with continuing their coursework. And we found last year that students are often willing to help, to take notes, or to take a video, or to go back and brief the student that might be isolating, but it will take some accommodation by you. And I think that's the highlights, and I hope to hear from you all, but I have another 2 minutes if there's any questions.
I have a question.
Yeah, Joan.
I wonder if I went out and bought a lot of self-tests, and could I build them to the program instead of asking the students to bring them and not know if they're really going to be able to get those in their backpacks or suitcases?
You may have put an allotment into your budget, and many of our budgets have done that, and you're welcome to use that allotment for test kits. But we can get you free ones from Lacey, or you can stop by that Link Central. There's no cost for those.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I have a question. You mentioned earlier that students are not allowed to drive, and you gave an example of students heading off, let's say on mopeds or something. What about bicycles or e-bikes, which of course are very popular now in urban areas? Would an e-bike be considered a vehicle that they're not allowed to drive, or not?
That's the first time we've been asked that question, Ken. And as long as you've thought about it, put it like in your risk management plan, and you think that you can manage that safely, I think bikes have been used before, and hopefully there's going to be, decent bike paths or sidewalks or something, and you're just going to want to make sure that it's something that you can manage safely.
Okay, but they're not prohibited outright from renting bikes or e-bikes?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, you know where to find me if anything else comes up that uses up my time. Thank you. Back to you, Crystal.
Thank you, Catherine. And so moving on to reporting incidents abroad. Of course, Catherine and Elena have elaborated on the importance of reporting any major incidents that occur abroad on your program. And one item that we had introduced this past summer was a new global education incident reporting form, which is a new form that we've developed in our application system to kind of formally document incidents that may occur on your program. So those of you who may have led programs this past summer or winter may have heard a little bit about this form already, but it is officially in use now. So this form, which is linked in this slide, and again, this slide deck will be shared with all of you, is designed for faculty and staff to notify OGE and relevant partners about reportable incidents that occur abroad. Ideally, this is a form that will be completed once the incident has been resolved, so that it does have kind of step-by-step what happened, when, who was impacted by it, if there was an international SOS case number, and so forth. All of that would be included in this report. So examples of what we would like to see be reported in this form would be student conduct issues, Title IX issues, which will be addressed later in this orientation, student illnesses, including COVID cases, any injuries, anything above first aid. There is an incident definition list that is included in this questionnaire. So once you begin the form, you will see a PDF document that will open that lists several different kinds of incidents and gives you the option to categorize this report based on the nature of the incident. Each report will be reviewed by OGE and will remain in your Teradata applicant history. So this form will be viewable with any other previous applications, like faculty proposals and so forth, that you will have completed for our office. So once you complete this form, we would want to make sure that you have all supporting information ready for the report. As I said, including international SOS case numbers or any supporting documentation that supplements the narrative that you'll provide. Why is this necessary? Well, we all have a moral responsibility to learn about incidents on our programs and to try to mitigate them in the future. And this form will not only help us to understand what happened with the program, but what steps were taken to help mitigate it and what additional support may be needed to not only support you, but support the individuals who may have been impacted by that situation. Catherine had also mentioned a few minutes ago that you are all mandatory reporters. All CU Denver faculty and staff with significant responsibilities for students and campus activities are considered campus security authorities in accordance with the Clery Act. So as a result, you must report any criminal activity that occurs on your program. So in this slide, you'll see that there is the hyperlink to the annual Campus Security Authority Skillsoft training that will be required for anyone who is leading the program or serving as support staff. This again is an annual requirement, and the university's Clery team will be checking to make sure that this is completed. So please be sure to do that ahead of your program start date. As Elena mentioned, when an incident happens, there is a list in your emergency action plan of the notification order. So be sure to follow the steps in that emergency action plan. We'd want to make sure that first and foremost that you ensure everyone's immediate safety, including your own, then get any necessary medical or emergency services attention for the students who may have any sort of emergency. And finally, contact our team using the steps outlined in that EAP. As Catherine mentioned, a member of our OGE team will be monitoring our emergency phone 24/7 for any calls or messages from faculty leaders. So upon calling us, please be prepared to answer questions such as, how can we best reach you? Are you comfortable for being our point of contact? What is the situation? And what support do you need? Next slide. And I will pass it to Emily to discuss EAPs in more detail.
Yes, so hi everyone. You might have heard us mention emergency action plans or EAPs earlier in the presentation, but here is a sample of what an emergency action plan looks like. This is a really critical plan. We want you to have a copy of this, the final copy, which your OGE program manager will send you once it's been finalized and approved by the International Risk Management Committee. But we want you, the students, and your partners on the ground to keep a copy of this at all times, whether that's printed off. I've seen some faculty print them and laminate them. I've seen screenshots on the phone, whatever works best for you. We also recommend going through this form with all of your students as well, so that everyone is familiar with this. As I think Catherine mentioned earlier, this goes step by step through what you should do in case of an emergency. And I don't think I mentioned this, but the International Risk Management Committee is going to keep a copy of this form with us. Every member of the committee will have access to this as well. And so it really just tells all of us really every single detail we need in case of emergency. Each form is obviously specialized to your program, to the program location. It has contact information, the 911 equivalent. That's an important one. Let's see. It's going to have the hospitals we recommend that you go to. This is just kind of the quick access form. So you're like, where are my students? Where's the local police department? You can pull out this form and all of that information is right there in front of you. And this really helps us, the International Risk Management Committee, know what's going on in the program. If you did call and there was an emergency, we could reference the itinerary outline on here. We can reference the emergency meeting places. I think the emergency meeting places are really important to call out. Make sure you and the students know where these are. Maybe during the orientation on the ground, walk everybody by that emergency meeting place so that everybody is familiar. And let's see. Yes, keep a copy of this at all times. And something that's not noted on here, but it's really important to call out is free time. We do recommend noting any free time in the itinerary outline on this form, but we recommend for all faculty, make sure you have a plan in place to know where your students are during free time. I don't know if we've mentioned it yet either, but most incidents abroad happen during free time. So if there is an incident, a situation, it's best that you know where your students are. If they happen to be in a different country for the weekend, if they have multiple days free and they, hop over to Spain, or if they're in a different city, we recommend that you know where they are so that we can manage the incident. I think I've covered pretty much everything, but yeah, this again, I know somebody mentioned the duty phone, but the numbers are listed. There's our duty phone, Catherine's number, and then the front desk. So there's several different ways to get in contact with us in case of emergency. Anybody have any questions about the emergency action plan? Okay, if not, you'll get a final copy. It'll say final in the title of the document. And that is the document that we want you to show the students, you to show your partners on the ground, and that the IRMC will keep in our records.
Thanks, Emily. I'm going to stay off camera just because I'm sharing my screen and my computer tends to struggle when I'm on camera and doing, Zoom screen sharing. But we're going to talk about insurance a little bit. So if you've been working with us for a while, you know that we made the switch from GeoBlue over to International SOS for the insurance provider for our programs a couple years ago. So this is a reminder for those of you that remember those days that we don't use GeoBlue anymore for our students. However, as faculty members, you are still automatically covered by GeoBlue when you go abroad, and you are enrolled in the International SOS plan along with your students. We find that it's better practice to have everybody covered under the same plan in the event of an emergency. All program participants, like I said, are enrolled by our office before you all leave. So you don't have to worry about that. We take care of that. And if any students or faculty, if any program requires proof of insurance or verification of coverage, we can provide you with that before you depart. If you haven't already seen those, if you need them, please let us know. Otherwise, your OGE liaison has probably already taken care of that if that's required. So the important information for you to know, and this is listed on your EAP, it's in the ISOS membership card that you will receive in your digital pre-departure orientation packet. Students have access to it, have a copy of it. What you need to know is this membership number, this 11 BCAS followed by 5 zeros and a 6. That's what's important to reference if you're logging into the website, if you are calling ISOS. And if you do have to call ISOS, I just did this recently, and hopefully you have too in the recent past, you should be saying that you're affiliated with CU Denver under the University of Colorado. So that's just for you to know that every faculty, staff, and student has access to ISOS and can call and use their resources at any time. So while you're abroad, before you go abroad with students, call ISOS if you're ill or injured, if you need to find a local hospital, clinic, physician, pharmacy, if you need to refill a prescription, or if you need to be evacuated. We really hope that's not going to happen this year, but if there's a medical, political, or environmental emergency, call us, but also know that you can call ISOS to start facilitating that evacuation process. Something that's new for this year that I'd like to call out is that our policy with Chubb, the insurance provider, excludes injury resulting from off-road motorcycling, scuba diving, jet, snow, or water skiing, mountain climbing, skydiving, amateur automobile racing, or automobile speed contests, or bungee jumping, spelunking, whitewater rafting, surfing, or parasailing. So you should not be participating in these activities on your program, but it's also important that students know if they do happen to do that during free time, they are not covered by our policy. So if you can help us reiterate that with students, that is tremendous. And finally, like Catherine mentioned earlier, ISOS also provides health, safety, and travel information about your host country, information about whether the medication you're taking is legal, where you'll be traveling, and most importantly, we think access to 24/7 emotional support. So for any incident that a student might have abroad and they need that telehealth counseling, they have 5 free calls with ISOS each time. I'm trying to go very quickly to stay on time. So that's it on ISOS. If you need any information, if you need the explanation of benefits from us, we have that information available for you. And then finally, some reminders and some expectation setting / asks from our team. So reminders to log back into your proposal application in Teradata. Any OGE member can assist you with that, as I know it's not the most user-friendly platform. So if you need us to walk you through it, we're happy to do that. But we ask that you submit your co-faculty addendum if you have it. And then within that, or your proposal, submit your emergency contact information for yourself, your flight information, and a copy of your passport. This is so that we can assist in any emergency, just like we ask the students to do. You know, they have to submit all of that information as well. And finally, if time and your schedules allow, we really encourage you, and some of this is built into your budget this year, we ask that you have a post-program debrief with your students once everyone has returned to the US. This allows students some time to process and think about what has happened and reflect critically about their program. But having you as the faculty member there to facilitate that discussion really helps cement what they've learned and how they can apply that in real life, you know, talk about it in interviews. If you don't have time to do that, or it's not in your budget, not in your plan, all good, please send them our way at Links Connect so that we can connect them with those resources and we can work with them on that post-program critical reflection. They can meet with our career center to talk about how to, incorporate the skills they've learned into their resume, into responding to interview questions, that sort of thing. And truly, finally, the last thing is that we ask that you help us collect program survey responses towards the end of your program. So we will send you a link for our survey, for our post-program survey. And if you can give students just 10 minutes of class time to sit and answer that survey, we find those so helpful. And as you know, we share the responses with you as the faculty and then incorporate responses and suggestions from students into the next year's programs. So we find it helpful, future students find it helpful. So if you can help us give students a few minutes, that would be awesome. And we are going to move on to Trang, who's going to talk to us about finance. Trang?
Yes, just give me 1 second.
Sure.
I think my computer froze for a second. Good morning. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
I don't have a whole lot to say to anyone. I'm requesting every faculty, please keep all of the itemized and payment receipt for me. These are just the example of how the receipt looks like. I will before your departure, 1 week prior, I will connect with you. I will send you all the operational budget on the updated student enrollment and expenses. Once you return from the trip, I will connect with you again so I can help you reconcile the report. So there's just a few things that I would like to mention to you all is that for any purchase you make, or even transportation, if you have to tip somebody, you allow to tips up to 20% of the service charge. So just so you know, donation is not allowed. So it's not going to be reimbursed to you if you decided to donate to someone. I don't think I have anything else to say, but I will just leave it Q&A question if you have anything that you can ask me, or you can always reach out to me by email. I can help you all. I think by now, I have connected to all of the faculty. I'm not sure who am I missing, unless I don't have the program that has not yet been confirmed. I believe it's the Mexico ecology. I haven't heard back, but I'm not positive on that one. I think the program is confirming. Not sure if the faculty is here.
Yeah, we're here. We are trying to figure this out right now because our program started quite late. There's certain delay in our program. Yeah.
Yeah, the faculty handout is there, so you can always email me or team me. So I'm happy to help.
Thank you.
For cash advance, if you need it, you do need to let me know ASAP. If this is the very first time, it's gonna be a difference. We have to set you up for the first time for cash advance. That if you have done the cash advance before, so you can go ahead and request the cash advance in Concur. And I believe for the country, like I think I'm seeing Joanne here. Joan, I think Joan, not Joanne, Joan. From Cuba.
Just emailing you, Tran. I will definitely be submitting.
I know you're gonna do a big cash advance, so making sure you list all the detail. And the receipt book, I believe OGE can provide you that, because since like you utilize a lot of cash when you're there in Cuba.
Right, due to paper shortages, people don't always have receipts printed out.
I think that's all I have. If you have any question for me.
There was just one more slide on a bad receipt example. Did you want to talk through that?
No, I would just mention that keep all the itemized receipt. I can't say that you can't drink a beer or something, but it's not the alcohol part is not going to be reimbursed to you. But you can just mark it for me that is the alcohol, so I can deduct it from your expense, from your report when I help you reconcile. And if this is just the receipt that, if you're gonna provide me this one, it's missing something, that this one is not telling me what was purchased. So I want to make sure, this is why I mentioned an itemized showing what was purchased, the item, like the detail, along with this one would be good. So if you're just gonna provide me, this is not good. Just so you know. This is the bad receipt example. Thank you, Nicole. Yay, break time. Any question for me?
Well, thank you so much, Train, for being here and for sharing all of helpful advice with all of our new and returning faculty leaders and support staff. I know that there has been quite a bit of information shared with everyone for the first half of this orientation. And before we head into our break, I did just want to ask if there are any other pertinent questions about the material that has been shared so far, since the second half of this orientation will feature guest speakers from across campus. I know that there has been quite a bit of activity in the chat that we try to address. But again, if you have any questions, please feel free to share those. Yes, Jorge, yes, we will share the slide deck with everyone as part of the follow-up emails that we'll send out. So I will send an email to all faculty leaders, including the link to this recording, our slide deck, our guest presenters slides, and all of the digital resources, including the list of non-covered insurance activities, international SOS information about your program's destination, emergency contact details, and other resources that we've shared with students during the students pre-departure orientations. So you're welcome. Any other question? Yes, Anne.
Hi, Crystal, just a question about collecting students' telephone numbers and contact info in country. Is it acceptable to collect their telephone numbers that we may only be able to use through an app, like a WhatsApp? Yes, it's fine.
Yes, that's absolutely fine. In fact, it's very common for faculty leaders to use WhatsApp to communicate with students while abroad. So that's definitely a great idea.
Thank you.
And it looks like Mary Lee has added in the chat that she also uses WhatsApp and already have it set up.
Thank you.
For her group. Very good question. Any others?
Hey, Crystal, I asked Catherine this too, but do I need to just tell the students they can't do any of those activities that were named? I just need to know if I need to write back and tell them to cancel that excursion.
That's what we would recommend because it would be a non-covered activity for insurance purposes. And as Emily had mentioned in the chat, this is also explained during the pre-departure orientation that we give to students. So mentioning that there are activities that are not covered by the plan that we enroll students into. So definitely reinforcing that would be great.
But Annie, we do have students who go on boat trips and they could maybe shift gears, and you include that then in your emergency action plan requiring, or at least in your guidance to them, requiring that they use life jackets, that there are multiple people on the boat, that it's a licensed provider, it's not on a level 4 river full of rapids. Think it through, but boat trips do happen.
Yeah, I would just add, if I may, this is Elena. Keep in mind that while we never like to be in the business of saying, you can't do something on your own free time, the reality is this, that if something were to happen, we are going to have to respond. We are going to have to respond to that emergency, and we're not going to have the insurance coverage to help us. So things do happen. So again, while we don't like to say no, if it's a non-covered event, I think the answer is no, because it does become our issue to manage if in fact they do make that decision.
That's right. And helmets are a good idea on all biking. Thank you, Elena.
Well, thank you all again for these fantastic questions. Please keep them coming. Know that we will have another Q&A session at the end of the orientation. But for now, we're going to take a 5-minute break. Please return at 11:02 a.m. And then we will have guests from the Office of Equity, guests from the Counseling Center, and from Student Conduct come and share information with all of you. Those who are returning faculty, remember that the second half of the orientation is optional, so we do highly recommend for you to attend, especially since some guidance may have changed, and we do have new individuals who we're working with in those different offices. So thank you so much, and see you back at 11:02. Okay, everyone, it is 11:02. So we will dive back into our orientation. So give everyone a second to return. And I am beyond excited to introduce Carissa Stolen from the Office of Equity, who will be here to present more about the Office of Equity and also share another interesting case study with us that reflects, again, the situations that do happen on our programs abroad. So Carissa, the floor is yours.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Crystal, and good morning, everyone. I am thrilled to be here. I always love any opportunity I have to interact with our campus community. And outside of today's presentation, if there are any needs or questions or hypotheticals that you all want to process through or discuss, I'm here. You can contact me via email, and all of that information will be at the end. But just want you to know you're not alone in going through any of these issues, and there are folks in our office that can support you. So, like Crystal said, my name is Carissa. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I serve as our Prevention, Education, and Training Coordinator in the Office of Equity. The Office of Equity is also known, some folks refer to us as like the Title IX office, which we do administer and enforce, but our office also does a lot of other things outside of Title IX legislation too, and we'll kind of discuss what that looks like in our presentation. So today, this is kind of what we're going to be going through very briefly. We're going to talk about just the Office of Equity, who we are, our process, what happens when a report is made to our office, and how can we support you in enforcing and administering these university policies and affiliated violations, potentially if folks are found responsible for policy violations with their problematic behavior or an incident that might have occurred. We'll kind of talk about reporting and responding. So as faculty, you are what we would consider a responsible employee. So we'll talk a little bit more about what that designation means and what you are obligated to do because of that. We'll go over a scenario, like Crystal said, that directly applies to a situation that has happened in the past. So these are all things that have happened, but we'll kind of process through what this could look like and talk about some training, continued as well as mandatory, and then contact info and resources. And hopefully at the time or at the end, there will be time for some additional question and answer. Okay, so what we do. So that is our office's mission statement on the left. However, essentially, we are here to do 4 things. The first is to stop, prevent, and remedy any discrimination, harassment, sexual misconduct, or any related retaliation. And we do this through case resolutions, whether that's a formal investigation or an informal or educational resolution, which we'll talk about in a little bit. We'll explain what those things are. We also, throughout the process, offer supportive and safety measures depending on the needs of the involved parties. Our office is also here to provide education on topics related to what we do. So obviously, this would be an example of that, going over some of our policies, our procedures. We also offer ethical bystander intervention training, and then depending on department needs, we can also facilitate some more tailored trainings, maybe more specific case studies, scenario-based training, whatever we can do, we can tailor some sort of material if it's applicable and helpful. Also, this is really just making sure the educational component is to prevent harm and ensure that all staff, faculty, and students know their rights and responsibilities under policy. Our office also is supportive in designing policy to make our campus safer and more inclusive. And no matter who we're working with, we want to ensure that all individuals are treated with dignity, compassion, and respect. So our office is not a confidential resource. We are, all information that is provided to us, we consider private. And so we operate on a need to know basis in order to assist in the active review, investigation, resolution of the report, and related issues. So reports received by our office, we will not, call somebody up and be like, hey, we got a report about XYZ. These are all the involved parties, and we're just letting folks know that this is something that's on our radar. That's not what we do. We really try and keep information between the folks who need to know. And with that, it needs to be kind of authorized as applicable by case managers, as applicable through conversation with involved parties. If things are required by law, like if we're subpoenaed or something like that, we might have to disclose information. However, we try and operate to the best of our ability with only informing folks who need to know what's happening. These are some confidential resources on campus. So if you are ever like, maybe I want to word vomit what happened first, or kind of get some additional feedback or opinions on where I could start or where I need to report or who I need to contact, these offices are also on the far right. So Ombuds, our Phoenix Center, our counseling centers, mental health services on both the Anschutz and the Denver campus. So policies that our office is responsible for administering are here. So they're kind of in 4 buckets. So we have our non-discrimination policy, our sexual misconduct policy, and those 2 we're going to be talking about extensively today. So we'll go over specifics there. The last 2 we're responsible for is conflict of interest in cases of amorous relationships. So if there are relationships that evolve that are romantic, there's power dynamics involved. So let's say like a supervisor and an employee develop a relationship. You can't help who you fall in love with, right? But if there is some sort of power dynamic there, we will need to make sure that is removed, just to make sure that there is no adverse consequence. If a relationship goes south, we all know how that can go sometimes. And so we want to mitigate any of those concerns up front. And then pregnancy and parenting. So in addition to managing our on-campus lactation spaces, we're also responsible for supporting pregnant and parenting students through the enforcement of certain guidelines, as well as lactation space policies that we have system-wide. So for all CU campuses, as well as our campus-specific policies. And if you're curious about these last 2, we have information on our website. And if you have questions, we could talk about those offline and get more specific. Okay, so how do we do this? So we thought that it would be helpful when we kind of talk through, if I make a report to the Office of Equity, what's going to happen? And so we're going to kind of walk through what would happen if we received a report. And this concern that we're going to talk about is up top. So a student submits an online report regarding another student in their class who is making repeated unwelcome advances. So let's say that our office is notified of that concern. The concern can come in, this one says it came through an online report. So we do have online reporting forms that folks can go and fill out themselves. Folks are also welcome to give us a phone call. They can make a report via email. It can be directly to myself or somebody else, and we'll get them in contact with the case manager. We also receive reports made through the police at times, and occasionally there are reports made in person. And when we're kind of working this like remote, hybrid, in-person kind of schedule, we also can do like Zoom recordings, conference calls, all of that stuff, so we can accommodate those meetings. Okay, any questions so far before I kind of dive into the next steps? Okay, cool. So we have, oh, sorry, I'm going to go back one more. I'm so sorry. So with this, we're going to talk about this online report. So we're notified of this concern. And when we see this concern for us, what would kind of this might indicate is that there might be some potential sexual harassment, potentially some stalking, depending on the context of those repeated unwelcome advances. So those are some of the things that our office might immediately start thinking, okay, this might be something that would fall under our jurisdiction. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to contact the individual who was reported to have been impacted by the alleged misconduct. We're going to learn more about the concern, who's making the advances, what advances are being made, where are these advances happening? Is it on campus? Is it off campus? What's the impact and the harm? Are there potential witnesses? Is documentation necessary? How much contact do these two students have with one another? So we're kind of trying to assess kind of the who, what, when, where, why, and get a bigger picture of context of what's happening. We're also at this time going to be discussing the option if an individual wants to file a formal complaint, which would then be something where an individual may want to pursue more of a formal complaint process. So we talk about what that can look like. Regardless of if an individual wants to move forward with anything formal, we will provide supportive and safety measures throughout the process. So there is things that we can do even if someone doesn't want to move forward with something formal, or potentially if maybe the behavior or the incident may not rise to that level of a policy violation, there are still things that we can do to support folks. And then we're going to discuss resolution options. So after we've kind of assessed that safety of involved parties, are there stalking concerns? Are there safety risks for the reporting party? Are weapons involved? Is this going to become a wider, larger campus threat? We're then going to kind of start pursuing whether or not this would be something that would go formal or something that we'd keep as an educational resolution. So an educational resolution is going to be a remedies-based tailored response to unique factors and circumstances of an incident, but we're not going to determine whether or not a policy has been violated. So this could look like no contact orders, academic support measures, arranging for parties to retake a course, changing sections, discussing options for civil or criminal or civil protection orders, referrals to other campus or community resources. So it's really just going to be dependent upon the situation. Or if eligible and the person who has experienced the harm would like to move forward, we can pursue that formal resolution process. And with that, we are going to be determining whether or not a policy has been violated. And from that policy violation, if they are found responsible, there will be affiliated sanctions or kind of things that we need folks to do either prior to returning to the university, if there was like suspension or exclusion, if faculty or staff are put on administrative leave, whatever it may be. We're going to kind of talk about what is the impact and what are kind of the consequences of that. There are options to involve law enforcement throughout, so individuals can pursue a criminal or criminal kind of investigation as well as working through a university investigation. They can go simultaneously. And if drugs and alcohol are involved, we do like to inform, especially folks who have interactions with students, that minor infractions, such as the consumption of alcohol personally, for folks who are witnessing or have seen some kind of violence or misconduct happening, we want to make sure that there are reports to our office, that folks aren't like, I don't want to report because I'm going to get in trouble for doing something, right? So we want to make sure that folks know that there will not be disciplinary action if folks come forward if they had, consumed alcohol at the time that this incident did occur. Any questions about our process before we kind of start talking more specific about policy? Okay, perfect.
Real quick question before we move on.
Oh, sure.
So in this case, they report something online, right? But if they report it to you as mandatory reporters, we encourage them to make this report online, and we do our own reporting process as well. As that how that would play out?
Great question. Thank you for that. So yes, so as a responsible employee, you will be required or obligated to make a report. So yep, you can go online and do an online report. You can send an email and just say, hey, so-and-so disclose this to me. This is the information I have. And then you can encourage them to file a report on their own if they would like. Or as a responsible employee, you can just say, hey, I have to report this and what you have shared with me, and they will conduct outreach to you, and then you can choose whether or not you want to respond and engage with their office. So they don't necessarily have to do a report themselves, but they can know, at least we ask that you inform them that you're going to be reporting to our office. So if they do receive outreach from us, they're not like, where is this coming from? Why do more people know what happened? Great question. Okay, so with the policies, there are online trainings that we do, or the online training we require faculty and staff to complete. So I'm not going to go over extreme details with these because I really want to have time at the end for the scenario. So we're going to brief through these. We're going to start with our non-discrimination policy. I do want to note that right now there is the potential for a system-wide policy to be implemented in the summer. Really, that doesn't matter for you all right now. If anything, it's just going to make it more consistent across all 4 campuses. And if there are any changes or updates, you will be notified. But we just want to let folks know that there might be changes with this. Okay. So the non-discrimination policy is going to be based on these 15 protected characteristics. So any type of kind of prohibited conduct that is happening, it's going to be stuff that has happened based on one or more of these. So if you go to the, I guess looking at these protected characteristics, are there any questions about what any of these protected characteristics mean, or kind of what's included within those? Okay. If you do have questions, we have definitions and examples on our website as well, so feel free to look there. But the 3 types of prohibited conduct that come from our non-discrimination policy are going to be discrimination, of course, which is where someone's going to suffer an adverse consequence on a basis of one of their protected characteristics. So that could be a failure to hire or promote somebody based on their race, for example. There is failure to accommodate. So there are 4 protected characteristics that require reasonable accommodations to be made by the university. And those are disability, pregnancy, religion, and creed. If those are not, if reasonable accommodations are not being made, or accommodation agreements that have been kind of set up through disability resources and services, that would be something where our office would investigate and look into that. And the last is harassment. So this is going to be any type of verbal or physical conduct related to a protected characteristic that unreasonably interferes with someone's ability to access their work or educational environment and is creating some sort of an intimidating or offensive kind of space to occupy. So an example of this could be a faculty member refusing to use someone's pronouns. Okay. Briefly, we're going to talk about the sexual misconduct policy. On the next slide, a brief piece of this is consent. That is essentially what the entire policy is based off of. I know that this is something that you all have heard many times, I'm sure. So this is kind of what everything is dependent upon, whether or not there was consent to engage in a particular sexual activity or some form of sexual or dating relationship components there where harm or violence can be caused. So on the next slide, we're going to go over, and these
Hey, Carissa, sorry, I'm going to jump in because I raised my hand.
Oh, please, I can't see, so please let me know.
Oh, sorry. So you just casually mentioned the not using students' pronouns. And I'm taking students to countries where the pronouns is just very different. Like this isn't like the same context. So I could foresee that a student who uses they pronouns who is on my trip, that would be an issue potentially there, and we've talked about it. But I can't control if somebody in another country is inappropriately not referring in the right pronouns. And we can talk about it, I think, with some of our folks there, but again, like this is a different context, culturally, socially, everything. So can you just maybe, because we're talking about study abroad here, mention what these reporting processes look like? Like, am I supposed to file a report anytime one of our partners in the other country doesn't use the appropriate pronoun? Because that would be very challenging.
So great question. So with that kind of the pronouns example, it would be that refusal to use it is kind of like a blatant disregard. Of course, you can't control other people, kind of their use of pronouns and cultural context that can make sense. So you're not responsible for every single instance of someone being misgendered. That would and we wouldn't say every time make a report about that. However, like you said, having those conversations and ensuring that you as the faculty member who is leading the group abroad or has that kind of authority in that space to really make sure that you yourself are honoring this person's pronouns, understanding that there can be a lot of trauma that can come from that if being misgendered, and ensuring that the folks that you are within this kind of group that's going abroad, y'all are spending a lot of time together, making sure that there is that expectation that those that pronouns are being honored and followed. And if there becomes some sort of hostile environment where this thing is like refusing and there's creating like a lot of tension and it's just like this blatant disregard, then that would be something that would warrant a report to our office as well. Definitely there's intent versus impact, right? So folks aren't trying to misgender folks. And so it's just kind of like you're trying to learn and be better and work with one another. So in those moments, it's just kind of acknowledging that there could be harm caused and that can create hostile environments for folks. So you're just kind of trying to do the best that you can. And if you need help or if anything's happening abroad, if that does occur, we can always walk through steps as well. Cool. Okay. So this is the form, all the forms of prohibited sexual misconduct. We won't go into each of the specifics. However, you can kind of see that on some of these, there's a Title IX version and a non-Title IX version. Y'all don't need to really worry about the specific differences necessarily. Really, it's just about the prohibited behavior that is occurring. Something that is very specific to study abroad programs. With our new Title IX legislation, I guess it's not so new anymore, but from the legislation that came from 2020, one of the things that was in there was for something to be considered Title IX prohibited sexual misconduct, it has to be conduct that occurs within the United States. So that did have a big impact on study abroad programs because we're like, hey, this kind of stuff is happening abroad as well. And that can create concerns for folks who might experience these things abroad. So that is why, and one example why we have Title IX versions of this misconduct and non-Title IX versions, because let's say that stalking is occurring while they're abroad. If we just had Title IX stalking as the form of misconduct, our office wouldn't be able to do anything to kind of investigate or kind of prevent that from happening. But since we have stalking, or just kind of it doesn't fall under the Title IX version of what that means, we are still able to investigate and provide support. Are there any questions about these forms of prohibited misconduct? Okay. One last note about that, there are potentially new Title IX regulations being announced this summer. So just like with the non-discrimination policy, if there are changes to this policy based on those regulations, you will be notified. All right. So there are some related violations under this policy. Again, I want to save some time at the end to discuss what these are. All of these are provided and fully detailed on our website and also in our required mandatory online course. I do just want to note that the retaliation has an asterisk next to it because we do enforce and look into cases of folks who fear or are experiencing retaliation based on having made a report to our office to begin with. And so we want to note that retaliation, if folks are experiencing that, it has to be in relation to one's participation in our process. So there has to be some sort of adverse consequence that someone's experiencing because they have made a report. Okay, we'll briefly discuss, I know I'm at time already, I swear this like goes by so fast, but I'll just touch briefly on responsible employees, and I can always send follow-up on kind of that scenario. But like I said, the responsible employees, this is going to be defined as folks who have any of these capabilities. So hiring, promoting, disciplining, evaluating, grading, formally advising, or directing faculty, staff, or students. If you do any of these things, this just means, and we can go to the next slide. I think actually 2 slides. Let's do one more. And I can talk about that. Okay, so responsible employees, your obligation is to report this information. Names of folks that are involved, possible witnesses, when and where the incident occurred, and any other details as it was shared with you. So we don't need you to do the investigation, sit down, get every single detail possible. You really can just share, hey, Alex mentioned that this happened when they were on the bus traveling to this location, and this is what happened, and this is all that I know. We'll be like, great, amazing. We'll reach out to Alex and we can do that further engagement, just because we want to try and avoid any re-victimization or re-traumatization from someone having to share their story with you. And then we reach out and we need to hear that same story. And then we're like, hey, actually, this doesn't go to us, so we're going to refer you here. And then they have to share their story to that other resource. So we really want to try and mitigate that as much as possible. And sometimes we get the question, what if folks don't want me to? Sometimes it can feel really bad when someone really trusts you and is like, hey, please don't tell anybody. I really just want to tell you because I have this relationship with you. Unfortunately, it is something that you will have to report to our office regardless. So if you can set that expectation up front before you all go abroad, and you just let folks know, hey, I am a responsible employee and this is what this means. If you do report any instance of discrimination, harassment, sexual misconduct, I will have to involve the Office of Equity, but they are here just to provide you support, and there is no punishment for anyone choosing not to participate. So even if you have to submit a report, they can completely ignore any of our outreach and they do not have to engage with us. So it really is just so we can provide those supportive and safety measures. Okay. Last note, you'll have a copy of this presentation, but this is just in case you need to report to other offices. Sometimes folks are like, do I report to like Dean of Students, care teams, student conduct? Do I report to Office of Equity? And so this is just kind of helping provide those contacts and what kind of concerns you'd report to which office. This was our scenario. I do have bullet points that I can type out and send to you all so that way you can continue in your orientation. But if you read this and then you see those examples, but you have further questions, we can definitely have conversation. I'm more than happy to come back or just email and have convo, but I will send some suggestions and things to consider with that. Mandatory training, you all probably have already completed and done. We do require training within the first 90 days of employment, and then folks need to retake it every 3 years. Folks can do that online or via instructor-led. And then this is our contact info. So if you do have any questions, this is general. Elizabeth Schrock is our Title IX coordinator. And I can also put my email information in the chat. So if you have any outreach you'd like, you can send it my way. And I'm so sorry, this time always goes so fast. I'm like, how did I just talk so much and do no engagement? So I'm so sorry. Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you all so much.
No worries, Carissa, and thank you again for letting us know as well about the possible changes and updates that may be coming. That's very helpful for us all to know. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
Bye.
Thank you, Carissa. Wonderful. And Carissa, again, is an incredible resource over at the Office of Equity. So please follow up if you have any questions for her about any of this content. And again, we will not only share her presentation, but share those resource links with all of you as well. Moving on to our next presentation, I am happily to share that we have Caitlin here from the Student Community Counseling Center to discuss how to help. So Caitlin, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'll try and keep it brief today, but just wanted to discuss with you how to help support your students that you are working with while you are abroad. My name is Caitlin Rossler. I'm the Assistant Director at the Counseling Center at CU Denver. So just jumping right in, we all know that college is really tough for a lot of reasons. So just in general, we've got some common, stressors that students experience in college, right? Developing new relationships, college level, academic pressures, exposures to different ways of thinking, beliefs, expectations, social pressures, time management concerns. So our students are often already dealing with a lot of new and different stressors compared to, their experiences in high school or before they entered college. When they study abroad, we can go to the next slide, those increase, right? For a lot of folks, there's additional stressors when they leave their comfort zone, right? And the things that they know. This could be stress related to travel. For a lot of students, just haven't traveled a whole lot, right? Certainly to other countries. So just stress related to travel in general can heighten, concerns around mental health or just general levels of stress. Increased sense of separation or loss in regards to relationships and connection and community, adapting to a new culture, new environment, and then, developmental concerns depending on the age of our students. That lack of connection, community can often lead to questions around identity and belonging, if they should be there, if they're competent, etc. And then, exacerbation of pre-existing conditions. So if someone's already struggling with general anxiety, let's say, oftentimes changing your environment can really contribute to heightened anxiety in that situation, for instance. So you as faculty, we can skip to the next slide as well. You as faculty have a really important role to play in being able to help identify in your students the possibility of someone being more distressed, right? Or increasing their levels of stress to the point in which they may need some support. So some common signs of distress in our students are listed here. Really, I think, to put it in a nutshell, if you are working with a student who you generally have a good sense of, and you start to see shifts, right? You start to see decline in their work, in their attendance, participation, maybe their ability to concentrate or turning things in on time, possible concerning or bizarre behaviors or responses within the classroom environment or, on a chat like Canvas type system. A lot of those are, cause for concern. Some of that is developmental, some of that is appropriate given the fact that they're in a new space and trying to navigate, being a college student in a different country. And if it's repeated or higher levels of concern in regards to the sign of distress, that might be a time to suggest to intervene. If they share with you or a classmate or a colleague that they're struggling with, motivation, sleep, appetite, they're just not really showing up. Maybe their appearance has shifted or changed in terms of hygiene, or just general mood or behavior. Those are all also, common signs of distress that might be worth noting. So if there are, like I said earlier, we all are human, so are our students. A lot of times those common signs of distress are natural and understandable. If they are repeated or getting to the point in which they are really concerning for you, it may also be worth kind of looking at the possibility of these safety concerns, emerging for these students. So common safety concerns that we see are sort of indicators of safety concerns would be expressions of hopelessness, worthlessness. This is a fairly common one, especially with folks struggling with depression. Any sort of ruminations about death, suicide, any sort of self-injurious behavior. So if you know of someone that might be harming themselves in any sort of way, that can be actively through cutting or burning or hitting themselves. It can also be by withholding food, things along those lines. Or any sort of expressions of fear of losing control or acting violently, thoughts of hurting others. All of those are obviously much higher level safety concerns that you would want to make sure that you're relaying to, which we'll get to in a little bit, just the folks on campus that can help support you to help support that student. Okay, we can go to the next slide as well. So as I mentioned before, as faculty, you engage with your students often, right? You're seeing kind of what their norm and their behaviors are. So you're in a really good position to be able to recognize any behavioral changes that might indicate a student that is in distress, or even further, possibly struggling with their own sense of safety and keeping themselves safe. So if a student has a significant change from what we call sort of their baseline, right? Which is their general behavior, their general sense of, their appearance, their hygiene, and also how well they do in school. If there's a significant change from that, that might indicate distress. So oftentimes for our students, especially folks studying abroad who may feel lonely or disconnected, it can really make a big difference at you as their professor, instructor, to let them know that you might be a bit worried about them, right? Checking in and seeing how they're doing. Sometimes willingness to just address the situation and name it makes all the difference for our students to feel supported, to feel seen, and to feel like someone cares, right? So I know that often the tendency is to shy away from that because it's a hard conversation to have. And I know from experience that oftentimes being able to actually name it makes a world of difference. I have a lot of folks that I see at the counseling center who have mentioned to me, I'm so thankful that that my teacher said something I didn't think anyone noticed, or their advisor or whoever. So that might be you in this scenario, and have the opportunity to help support this student. So depending on your comfort level and your experience and having conversations with students that might be in distress, you can certainly do your best to intervene yourself, offering referrals, encouraging, getting connected to a therapist, for instance, or you can refer, and we can talk about how to do that and what mechanisms are in place for you all as faculty to do that. But I would encourage you to know your limits, right? We don't ever want to promise a student confidentiality in your roles. Not wise to do. You can certainly let them know that you will, use discretion in who you're sharing these things with, if they're willing to share with you some sensitive information. But certainly, based on Chris's last presentation, obviously we don't want to promise that we won't share anything with anyone, because there may be times in which you are obligated to do that. And safety concerns are an instance of that, right? We don't want to hold on to that. We want to make sure that other people help support that student and help support you in making sure that student is safe. So if you're not comfortable dealing with that head on, we can absolutely help with other resources to get you and that student well connected. So just some tips on how to engage a student that might be struggling or that you're worried about. I'd always encourage you to talk with them in private if possible, not in front of other students, and sort of pulling them aside or asking them to, speak just with you one-on-one, and letting them know why you're concerned, right? Hey, I've noticed that you've, not really been showing up as often. You're not really turning in things, and you seem down. I've noticed you crying in class. Can you tell me a little bit about what's going on, right? So naming what you're seeing and then asking for what their perspective is, right? Can you share with me how you're doing, what's happening for you? And letting them know that you care by sort of active listening, right? So a lot of times as a therapist, this is something we do often, right? Someone's going to be talking to us, sharing a lot with us about their situation, and we want to be demonstrating that we're listening, and oftentimes sort of just paraphrasing, reflecting back what they just shared with you is a really surefire way of letting them know, like, you're hearing what they're saying, right? So they may tell you a whole sort of blurb about how they're missing home and they're struggling because of this relationship and this issue and this loneliness, and maybe reflecting back and saying, sounds like it's really tough for you to not be home right now and have, the people that you normally have in your life. That can go a long way to make a student feel heard. Hopefully the student would feel supported and calm in their interactions with you. But if someone is, has a raised voice or takes a defensive stance, it's always really helpful and important to for you to stay calm as best as possible. And that might, entail you kind of taking some deep breaths, taking a little break to just sort of re-engage in a calm way to show that you've kind of got some, steady perspective when you're working with them. Asking questions to clarify, to understand, not assuming that you know what's going on for them is really important. And then lastly, sort of sharing your reactions and thoughts with them of, yeah, that worries me. I'm concerned about you. Let's get you some support. So sort of a hopefully helpful acronym really around risk and safety. If you are concerned about them in terms of, thoughts of suicide or harming themselves, it's important that you ask the question directly. It's actually a myth that does increase risk. It does not. If someone's already thinking about that, it can feel really supportive to have someone ask directly. So I would, ask, are you, having thoughts of hurting yourself or killing yourself? If they say yes, encouraging them to get help, right? Even if they say no, encouraging them to get help if you're concerned about them. Letting them know there are resources for them while they're studying abroad. We'll get to that, and then referring them to those. So one of the options that our students can utilize while they're studying abroad is our International SOS. The students are eligible to be seen for 5 sessions per incident, which is pretty generous. So if someone is struggling with a relational issue, they could be seen for 5 sessions for that, and then so on and so forth. They have 24 access to care, and there's the information here on the number that you can call while abroad. And then those students can still continue to access that care after they return home, just as long as they've started care while they're abroad. So that's a great resource to use. And then an additional one that's new for our CU Denver students, CU Anschutz students have had this for some time, but our CU Denver students as well now have access to My SSP. It is also 24/7 access in multiple languages, which is really wonderful, and more than are just listed here by request. But they have sort of immediate and crisis response support, but then they also have short-term, like ongoing care. So multiple sessions that a student can access as well. This is through chat, telephone, and video options through their app, which is pretty handy, or they can just call as well. And I put the number there for the 866 numbers for the United States, and then if you're calling from outside US or Canada, you would call the other number there. Care teams have hopefully been mentioned already to y'all, but if you have a concern for a student and you feel like you would like to make sure that that student's getting well-rounded support, making a care referral is one way to do that. Would be really important for you to be able to receive support for you and working with that student. So I listed both the care teams information here, Denver and Anschutz, and those support and services are available to students while they study abroad and to you as faculty. And then when the student returns to the United States after their abroad program, they're eligible to be seen at the CU Denver Counseling Center if they're a CU Denver student for 10 individual therapy sessions per calendar year. And we have our information there. We're located in the Tivoli Student Union, if you weren't aware. And then for our Anschutz folks, the next slide as well, we have the Student and Resident Mental Health Program that offer mental health services to our Anschutz students. So those are other referrals, other information that you can provide to your students while they're studying abroad if you're headed home soon, and letting them know they've got options on campus to be able to be seen and supported. I think that was fast and furious. Any questions for me? All right. Well, thank you all for everything that you do, and hopefully this will be a helpful tool for you all to just have those extra referrals and resources and information in your pocket. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Thank you so much, Caitlin.
Yeah, take good care.
You too. You
Bye.
too. But Vienna, we will share Caitlin's presentation with all of you, and know that mental health is becoming an increasing concern among our study abroad participants. We absolutely encourage you to continue using the Counseling Center as a resource ahead of your program. And last but not least, and we have our final presentation from the Office of Student Conduct and Community Standards. And I am very excited to welcome Shanna Peterson, who is the new director of the Student Conduct Office. And Shanna, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much. Certainly let me know if you can't hear me or see me. I have like a lot of windows open right now, so I'm gonna do my best. My name is Shanna Mae Peterson. I use the pronouns she, her, hers, and I am the new director of Student Conduct and Community Standards. It was certainly large shoes to fill, both figuratively and literally, when Dave left. And so I have been really just exceptionally honored to be able to hold this role, but also he's been really integral in my onboarding. So for those of you who have gone to a pre-departure orientation before, these slides might look very familiar, but we'll go ahead and we'll just get started. So when we're considering how we're addressing students when they're being disruptive, we're going to be looking for a couple of different expectations. So the first is really to stop the behavior in the least impactful manner possible. So if we have concerns, really addressing those concerns in a way that's meaningful. These are such quick trips. So doing something that is effective is going to be really important. The second is to minimize future repetitions of this behavior. And so part of that is going to be being really clear in what we're expecting and what concerns we might have for the behavior. And so when we're thinking about those future repetitions of similar behavior, just being really aware that we're being clear about that. So that way, no time is wasted on disruption. There's learning and cool things happening. And then the third is that we're creating learning opportunities regarding the behavior. So when students are returning from their trip, it certainly is an objective that they learned how to comport themselves, to handle conflict, to learn in really tough and different environments. And so we're wanting that following them when they come here. And so if part of that is them learning from their disruption, to me, that is a gold star. And I think it will be for you all too. So we can go to the next slide. So there's a pretty old saying, so old, 1999, that is the best predictor of future behavior is, and I'm going to have you fill in the blank. Yeah, it's past behavior. I think oftentimes we see behavior as somehow cyclical, or that, what someone did in the past is what they're likely to do in the future. And I want to kind of reframe that a little bit for us with how we might actually be able to predict behavior. So if we can go to the next slide. So in reality, and Dave has exactly who is responsible for this. I know NBITA often uses this saying as well, but in reality, the best predictor of future behavior is ... behavior after an intervention. And so what we're looking at is not what's happened before that led us to this point, because it might happen again. We're really looking to see how students are responding to that corrective action, to maybe a side conversation, to a boundary, to some clarity. And that's likely going to tell us how they're going to respond in the future. I think there's space for students to feel maybe remorse or embarrassment about their conduct. Those are all healthy things that we want to see, that's going to be a better indicator of how they're going to react in the future and what we can anticipate. So I guess in thinking of this, in the chat, if we want to do a little interaction, what have been students' responses to interventions that you all have seen? Good, bad, ugly, and indifferent. There's some bold people willing to put it in the chat. Okay, maybe not. That's okay. If you think of ideas of how students sometimes respond to interventions, feel free to pop it in there. Like I mentioned, maybe they're embarrassed, or we've certainly seen students become really escalated, and that might be a reason why we're not addressing or trying to intervene, because we're concerned with how they might respond. I think, you know, in some situations we see people change their behavior, and that's a perfect response to an intervention that we would expect. In some situations, we see students really taking on wanting to be a leader or a bystander. Maybe they're like, oh my gosh, my classmates didn't realize that, you know, this was inappropriate. I really want to make sure that, you know, that people don't make the same mistake I did. And so those are going to be a better indicator to how they're going to respond in the future. What I will say is offering an intervention and seeing an escalation will tell you far more about next steps than keeping an eye on things or monitoring things or hoping things don't get worse. So what I would say is, if there's an opportunity to defer or default to a low-level intervention, that's going to probably pay dividends. Okay, next slide. Okay, so when we're thinking about interventions, an intervention is an action that's taken, usually an action that's taken to address a behavior, maybe redirect, but it's something that without you all likely wouldn't occur. So it does require some amount of action. Interventions aren't just happening out in the wild. But reaction or interventions can be proactive, where maybe we're creating an intervention before it even happens. Reactive, where we're needing to intervene because something happened, or a mix of both. And so next slide. Okay, so when we look at different interventions, there's no perfect matrix or one size fits all. And so this multi-tiered intervention system is really helpful just to see where things can be kind of on a scale of intervention. So the bottom is a universal intervention. And so this is very proactive. You know, our students are on our best behavior, they just got there, and we're just setting a baseline for our expectations. And then as we move up, we have targeted. So maybe this is something where you're seeing a trend, or you're seeing some clicks, or maybe there's some culture norming that's happening, that it's not something that needs to be addressed head on, one-on-one, but it is something that maybe you want to raise awareness of. And so it could be addressing a particular behavior maybe that you're seeing, or that you're seeing maybe a course that's leading to maybe more concerning behavior. And then that top of the tier is, I think, what most people perceive interventions, and that's a one-on-one direct intervention with a person about their behavior. To the right is some very interesting scales that I think just create more narrative about this multi-tiered intervention. There's the size of the instructional group. So the larger the group, the more ability you have to setting those baseline norms. The smaller the group, so if you're working with a pair of people and one person's being disruptive, if you were to try to treat that as a universal intervention, it might get a little complicated to say somebody here is being disruptive. You're going to want to address that in a more, just in a more intensive way. The other thing is that intensity of the multi-tiered intervention might be more escalated if the behavior or the disruption is more intense. So for things that might not be as intense or maybe less frequent, you might be down in that universal space, but then as things begin to become more intense, more frequent, maybe more pervasive, then you'll have to increase that intensity in your intervention. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so for the universal interventions, like I mentioned, these are really going to be proactive. And so we're looking at creating program expectations. So are there expectations that when these students are abroad and they're shopping and going out to eat, how are they expected to comport themselves? Are there behavioral expectations of how to report and when to report and where to report? Is there an expectation that they be bystanders, or is the expectation that they're only responsible for their own behavior? So those are things that as a program you all will get to decide, and certainly I would make that very clear to folks. The next thing is really using that syllabus to set that baseline expectation. So that's another proactive measure. Typically in the syllabus, we're looking at things that there's an academic component to it. So how does compliance with this behavior that's listed in the syllabus encourage learning? So if there's a way to tie it back to the objective, back to making a good learning experience for folks, that's going to be really important. The other thing with it being in the syllabus is there could be some kind of grade attached to it. So you all as faculty are familiar with participation points and ways to make that measurable and to create some accountability for that by it being in your syllabus. The next thing I'll mention is with these proactive approaches, having a conversation with students about it is going to be the most helpful versus it just being in writing. So the writing is a great way to be able to point back to say, hey, I know that you know this because I know that you read this or you saw this, but then that conversation is where you can navigate the nuance of the disruption, of kind of what those expectations are, and then also so that the students can do the learning when they're asking questions about it or they're trying to find examples. So having those paired is really crucial to making sure that those expectations are clear. Okay, next slide. Okay, so for targeted interventions, this is where maybe it's not a one-on-one, but we're seeing some behavior that might need addressing, and targeted interventions can be done proactively, so maybe before there's a disruptive incident, or it can be done reactively. So some examples are maybe having a private conversation following class. I know Caitlin from the Counseling Center had mentioned feeling really comfortable just saying the words to someone. And so oftentimes I recommend folks say what they see. You don't have to qualify it or, give too much more information, but you can just say like, hey, I saw that you were really frustrated by that. I saw that you were struggling doing that task, or that you haven't been present in class. And so just as a way to begin that conversation without saying like, it seems like you're not taking this seriously. Like, we don't know what the student's going through. So it might be really sharpening that skill of saying what you see. A targeted intervention could also be a behavior contract. In that, we're providing some choice and decision-making power to the student to correct their behavior. At this point, they can make their decision with how they want to move forward and whether or not they want to continue to be disruptive, but it really gives them a lot of autonomy in that decision making. And so having a behavior contract can be really helpful. And then the other thing is redirecting an individual or a group. So certainly in conversations, if it feels like things are getting derailed, having a couple phrases maybe in your back pocket just to say like, hey, right now we're not talking about that, but I'd be happy to. there's mechanisms like, if you all are familiar with like parking lots or, you know, putting something in the garden. I went to training in Boulder and they would say like, oh, that's a seed for a conversation in the future. Let's put it in the garden. So it might be implementing something like that if it feels like you have a rowdy group that is straying in conversation, just as a way to really stay focused on the task at hand. So those can all be helpful interventions to try to decrease that disruption. Okay, next slide. Okay, intensive interventions are what they sound like. They're going to be a little bit more intense, and this is where that decision-making power for someone to amend their behavior is going to look a little bit different. So it could be a removal from the individual class period or the individual event. What I would say is I would be really considerate with using intensive interventions as far as like removing someone as a punishment for a behavior, in that if someone engages in disruption, I would be considerate to start removing those kinds of opportunities, because what we want to see is folks having an opportunity to amend their behavior, do better, stay engaged, and be a part of their education. What we don't necessarily want to do is to kind of hang a carrot in front of them as a potential to pull away and those educational opportunities become a punishment. And so just something to be considerate of. Certainly there are times where someone's behavior is disruptive to the learning of others, to themselves. Maybe there's like health and safety concerns. And so there are times when students may need to be removed from the study abroad experience. Please contact me if I can be a resource in those situations. Obviously, your group that's going to be there in the program can work closely with me on that. But if it feels like it's getting to that situation where it's creating an unsafe environment, that is going to be a concern of mine and something that I'm happy to help with. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and I appreciate this slide, and this really just breaks down what interventions we would anticipate for each tier. And so if you're trying to think of ways to implement and to create a plan, this is a really helpful slide just to give you an idea. If you want these slides, I'm happy to share them with you, but just to kind of start building in exactly what you're going to do, because there are times when, you know, I think we all say it like, I've seen everything, and then a student will do something and it's like, I never expected to see something like this. This is all brand new, and it can feel like that. But if there's a plan, then we can start laying the groundwork of like, okay, what bottom tier things did we miss? Can we do to get us started before we're put in a position where we're having to go to that top tier? Something else is really trying to pull people back down to that bottom tier. So making sure that they have an opportunity to amend that behavior and us not automatically jump to the most concerning. For like the highest level of concern for behavior that maybe we missed at those bottom tier opportunities. And now we're making really tough decisions. Next slide, because I think that might be it. Okay, that's it. Questions for me or about my role or anything that I can help with? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Am I good to cruise out?
Shannon, thank you so much. We're so delighted to have you on board on campus and look forward to working with you. Hopefully we're going to have a quiet summer, but we feel reassured having gotten to know you. Thanks again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. Have a good time this summer. Bye.
Thank you.
Well, we have reached the end of our planned pre-departure orientation content. And I will pass it back to Catherine for the questions and any final reminders and details for faculty.
You guys all get an A++. I know this has been a long morning and a lot of material thrown at you, but obviously our goal is that you're going to enjoy this study abroad experience as well, because you're going to be so well prepared. We look forward to working with you these last few days or weeks. Never hesitate, and thanks so much for tuning in. We'll get you an email a little bit later with more material, copies of this material, and we'll send this out to the faculty as a recording who may have missed this morning. Thanks again. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.